We're
Mhm.
basically just making this the easiest way possible to get chargers in the ground to help cities hit their decarb targets.
What's the current status of charging EVs right now? Like, where are we at right now, and
Yeah.
where do we need to be?
We are laser focused on cities and neighborhoods that have dense on-street parking.
I often joke, like, the perfect example is, if you drive an EV in Santa Monica, you get to park for free at the meters, and it's like 250 per 15 or 20 minutes.
Welcome to the Rideshare Guy podcast, where you will learn about the rideshare and mobility industry straight from Harry Campbell, who's got over 5 years experience covering the industry and has talked to thousands of drivers. There's no better place to stay up to date, entertained, and educated. So let's dive in.
All right. So Tiya Gordon is the co-founder of Itselectric, which is curbside charging for the 40 million drivers who park on the street. Tiya holds 20 years experience in design and operations across a range of disciplines for some of the country's top firms and institutions. She is now venturing to spend the next 20 years on projects that use design to wage war against the climate crisis, people who live in cities to go EV. So Tiya, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Harry. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. And I have to say, for those watching on video, you look pretty young. So it doesn't seem like you would have 20 years experience in design and operations. So whatever you're doing seems to be working.
Thanks so much. I didn't realize a compliment came with this, but I'm even bigger fan than I was before.
Yeah, I always like to butter up my guests, and then hopefully they let her rip when we start chatting and don't hold back. So,
It's working.
um, excellent. Well, and I guess that's just encouragement for those who listen to the podcast. They can always head to YouTube and watch our podcast, or vice versa. So appreciate you coming on, Tiya, and I'm really excited to chat to you because I've talked a bit about this. We've been covering, I would say, electrification in general has probably been one of my top three or four focuses of the Rideshare Guy business and what I'm spending my personal time on over the past 2-3 years. So I would love to know, tell us about your company. Let's start with, what's the problem that you're trying to solve with Itselectric?
Sure thing. So I live in a city. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I live in an apartment. And I, of course, was in New York City during the pandemic. And during that time, there's a member of my household who's immune compromised. I had to start looking at getting a vehicle to get around the city safely because it was not an option to ride on subways or buses at that time before we had masks and vaccines and all of the good things that helped us overcome the issues of the pandemic. And in doing that, I, of course, as a very conscientious person who recycles, who composts, who's environmentally minded, said, well, let me look at electric vehicles. Understanding, of course, I couldn't afford a Tesla, but let me just see what this is all about. And so I started looking into it and I was excited and I was, thinking about how amazing it would be to be able to travel by vehicle without creating an emissions footprint. And I said, okay, well, let's see, how would I charge this if I were to get an electric vehicle, just hypothetically, when I was
Mhm.
doing all this early research. And I found that I had basically no options.
Yeah.
I don't have a driveway. I don't have a garage.
Mm.
And in 2020, when, we were all obviously indoors and there's a lot of time that one had to spend on the internet,
Yeah.
there weren't a lot of charging stations available in 2020. So I did even deeper research and I found that I could get access to a charging station, but I'd have to get into a paid spot in a parking
Mhm.
lot or a paid spot in a garage. And then on top of that, I have to pay a premium for the EV parking spot. And then
Mm.
on top of that, I'd have to pay for the electricity use for
Yeah.
charging the vehicle. So I'm like, wow, well, this is creating a huge barrier for me right away. I don't have $800 a month to spend on a garage spot. And I imagine many other people don't as well. So it really sort of, started like clicking in for me about how, electric vehicles and the premise and the promise had a real issue in terms of how to make it real for people who were not, basically white and wealthy and suburban.
Mhm. Got it. How much of this do you think is a New York City specific issue versus other cities or other states? Or, like, I'm here in Los Angeles, and I guess, like, I get, most people live in like a more, Los Angeles is known for being more spread out, versus New York City, kind of the opposite. I guess they're at sort of extremes. So how relevant do you think this problem is to other areas?
I think it's incredibly relevant. I love LA for a number of reasons, but LA is also fantastic because LA has already about 4,000 public chargers.
Hmm.
400 of those are on curbside. And the reason that LA is so prolific is because, back in the day, if we go back to like the Jack Nicholson Chinatown days, when like all the utility companies were being established, for whatever reason, all of your accessory feeds, your feeds that go to your streetlights, your
Hmm.
feeds that go to your lampposts, that's all 240 volt.
Got it.
Whereas every other city in the US is
Mm.
120. So it's super easy for LA to convert a light post to an EV charger. We were just
Oh,
having a
interesting.
conversation with someone who works in the administration there this week, and they were saying that they can, with a small crew, they can do 2 conversions a day, which is pretty
Hmm.
impressive. So other cities such as New York, to answer your question, is this New York specific? It's not, because every other city doesn't have the luxury of just converting existing street furniture
Got it.
into chargers. So New York has this infrastructure barrier, right? Like
Mm.
the costs that it takes to upgrade the infrastructure, to put in the transformer if you're going to a direct utility connection.
Yeah.
All of these things create barriers for city. And that's why, for example, LA has those 4,000 chargers. New York City, they have the publicly stated goal of having 10,000 curbside chargers by 2030. They
Hmm.
currently have 100. And so their next target
Yeah.
is 1,000 by 2025. So, that means they're installing at this rate, they'd have to install 40 chargers a week to hit that metric. And so we invented Itselectric to be partners to cities that are looking for the easiest possible way to get EV chargers onto curbside
Gotcha.
without capital costs and without infrastructure upgrade.
Got it. Yeah. And I think it may be helpful to sort of define the different charging options out there. So we're sort of all on the same page. I'm picturing, luckily I live here in Los Angeles. So I'm picturing, I think I know exactly what you're talking about with the curbside chargers. I don't know what brand they are, but they're usually right near or next to a lamppost. I mean, you still have to pay for them usually, right? But
Yes.
they are, I guess, publicly available, and then you have to pay for them. And yeah, I don't know if there's well, you're telling me there's 4,000, so I definitely believe you, but I definitely see them,
Mhm.
all over town for sure.
Yeah,
So what
definitely.
are
So
the
this
different types of, like, what's the landscape of charging options look like out there that people are familiar with? I guess like maybe start with like Tesla supercharging network. Like that one is pretty obvious. Most people know of that and have seen it, and it's only available to Tesla users for the most part, right?
Exactly. And that's your DC fast charging. So that gives you, more or less around 75 miles or higher.
Hmm.
Sorry, that's my first flub. So level 3 would give you'd be able to basically fill up your entire battery in a matter of about an hour of charge.
Hmm.
Whereas a level 2 charger, which is where we stand, we like to say we're team level 2, gives you 25 miles per hour of charge. So every hour that you're plugged in, you get 25 miles.
Got it.
Keep in mind, sorry, then there's level 1, which is also known as, the pejorative trickle charge, which is basically like the same,
Hmm.
plug that you have for your hair dryer. You
Yeah,
plug that into
very
your
slow.
car, and yeah, you're getting about 3 miles per hour, right? So, that works if you're not traveling very much, if your car is largely parked in your garage most of the week. But it's not any kind of long-term solution for people who use their cars for
Hmm.
weekly commutes, or daily
Got it.
commutes, as the case may be.
Got it. So we've got the sort of 3 different speeds. Like I'm here in Los Angeles at home. I drive a Tesla Model Y, and I've got a level 2 charger, I guess, because I've got, sort of what I call like the washing machine outlet in my garage, and I can plug that in. And yeah, I think it gets around 30 miles an hour charging speed. So, basically overnight, I can get a full charge on my car, which is really nice to have. I've used the level 1 in the past, and it's too slow. I actually never use Tesla superchargers, or very rarely, because I have the home charging. So I'm just sort of thinking, like, I guess if in my situation, like I'm either charging at home or occasionally using a Tesla supercharger, I don't use too many. I guess there's also a bunch of these public charging networks, right? I guess
Mhm.
is that sort of the other big option out there when it comes to charging?
When you say public charging networks, most of what you're referring to outside of Tesla are the ones that are regional solutions, the ones that you
Hmm.
find on highway rest stops. And that's really helpful, obviously, when you're going, on large interstate trips where you're going from state to state, and you need to basically be able to quote, fill up or fuel up
Yeah.
your car, and on a consistent basis to get you, through driving for multiple days for long trips. So beyond that, though, what we're trying to do is create the first urban network of
Got it.
charging posts, because outside of the one verified example of Los Angeles and the
Hmm.
400, they have 4,000 public chargers, 400 are curbside. Those are from the Canadian company Add Energy, and they're called Flow, the Flow brand chargers. And
Mm.
they're a great charger. They have a
Yeah,
really strong
definitely seen those.
uptime,
Yeah, that's right.
really great company.
I
But
was
again,
totally
like,
blanking on the name earlier, but I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, because now I can totally picture the
see it.
curbside chargers in LA here.
Yeah, and I love LA because you go there and it just feels natural. It feels ubiquitous. I'm like, oh yeah, of course
Yeah,
there's chargers everywhere that I go. That makes
gotcha.
perfect sense.
So yeah, I was sort of trying to figure out like the gap that you guys are filling, and I like the way you put it. Urban network of charging posts, I think, is what you said, and it seems like, yeah. So I'm thinking people who live in more dense cities, apartments, condos, anything where you don't have a garage or you don't have a driveway or you don't have something that you can do on your own. And I guess really the denser the city, because that does exist in LA for sure. Like I know plenty of people in apartments and big buildings, that don't have charging,
Yeah.
and that might need more street charging. But I guess maybe the denser the city might help too.
Exactly. We are laser focused on people, I'm sorry, in cities and neighborhoods that have dense on-street parking.
Hmm.
So even houses that do have driveways and garages, a lot of the times, especially in cities like Los Angeles, you have an owner rental situation
Yeah,
where the owner parks their car in the driveway or garage and
yeah,
the tenant is then forced to park on street. So we're really focused on that on-street component.
got it. And what's the market size? I think I mentioned 40 million in your bio, but what's the
Mhm.
sort of market size for these types of people that you think you could reach with your product?
Yeah, that's our estimate, is that there are 40 million people in the US that do park on street that don't have dedicated off-street parking.
Got it. And obviously, not all of them have EVs, but a percentage. What percent of those do you think have EVs? Right now, and
Uh,
kind of trending towards in the future?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's very small right now. I think overall
Mm.
the total number of EVs on the road, and I need to get fact checked on this, is probably 3% of
Mhm.
all vehicles on road across the US.
I
California
don't
is
know.
much
In
higher.
LA, it seems like everyone drives a
Uh,
Tesla, so it might be higher
California
in
is
certain areas.
different country, is LA. It's a country I'd love to visit. But
I just
what
posted
we're
a picture online too of I parked at the gym with my white Model Y, and I got sandwiched by two white
oh my
Model 3s,
God,
and I took a picture, and it was pretty funny. But that is
that's
kind of what it's like in LA.
and that's, well, I mean, it's coming. So what we like to say is that um, no one realizes it unless you're kind of in this industry and you're in the sauce
Hmm.
like we are, but we're all in the funnel. The average American keeps their vehicle for between 8 and 10 years before they
Yeah.
sell it or trade it in. So let's just say that today in 2023, someone purchased or leased a new vehicle. Let's say purchased a
Hmm.
new vehicle in 2023. That means that we're dropping them off squarely in 2031, 2032 by the time they're ready to get their next car.
Yeah.
With 11 other states following California's mandate to ban the production of new internal combustion engines by
Yeah.
2035, it makes no sense for their next car purchase to be internal combustion, because there's going to be no resale value on that
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
unless you.
good point.
So for us, everyone is in this funnel. We don't realize it. And the same way that Tesla, was brilliant in that they put their charging network out first before the
Hmm.
cars, so
Yeah.
people could actually see. We need to do that for every other vehicle. Chargers need to be agnostic. The Joint Office of Energy and Transportation is pushing for there to be, basically agnostic solutions, so we're not tied to specific brands that can only charge in certain stations. Chargers need
Hmm.
to be able to serve all vehicle makes and models. And
Got
so
it.
for us, that's really where we're pushing. We want to make sure that the infrastructure is there, so that in the next 5 to 10 years, when we have the Department of Energy projects 15 million electric vehicles will be on the road by 2030.
Hmm.
And they said that we need 600,000 charge points to support those that are public, not private,
Got it.
just to keep that in mind.
Wow. Yeah, I think that, I want to dig into the product, the actual sort of product and tech side of what you guys are building. But I think one final point that I'm glad you brought that up, 600,000, because I think to me, it's, everyone sort of says, when it comes to charging, right? Oh, there's never enough chargers, or, even people complaining about Tesla or
Yeah.
complaining about, we know Uber and Lyft drivers that are driving and they complain, oh, I can't charge my car even when I get it free as part of a program or whatever. So I guess let's take one step back before we dive into the product. Like, what is the sort of macro environment look like when it comes, like, what's the current status of charging EVs right now? Like, where are we at right now, and
Yeah.
where do we need to be?
So right now, it's really easy to charge your EV if you have a garage or driveway. You purchase
Hmm.
or lease your EV, you have an electrician come in, put in that
Got it.
240-volt outlet, the same one that you described, the same as like you would have for your washer or your dryer,
Yeah.
and you're in business. You come home, you plug in like you plug your phone in every night, you go to bed,
Yep.
you don't think about it.
Yeah.
So it's super easy if you have that suburban typology. If you live in a city, it's a lot harder because how
Got
do
it.
you do that same pattern of charging where you park? And that's
Yeah.
what we're looking to solve.
Mm. Got it.
Because
Yeah, I
beyond
like
that,
that.
there's this whole sort of phenomenon, which I think is misguided, of destination charging, right? Like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm going to go to the Whole Foods, I'm going to go to the Walmart,
Yeah.
and then I'm going to time my charging to happen while I run these errands.
Hmm.
It's a very complicated proposition. And unless you are, again, like a diehard EV head
Yeah.
or a climate avenger, you know what I mean? Like, you are not going to schedule this into your week. You have your
Yeah.
job, you have your family, you have laundry, you have errands. To be able to like actually have to cognitively load charging your car for several hours in a location that's not your house
Hmm.
is a lot to ask.
Yeah, well, I definitely I feel like, when I'm out and about, like level 2 charging when you're out and about is almost like doesn't do much for your car. If you've got a 300-mile range and you're only there for 20 minutes and you're getting level 2, I mean, you're literally adding like 15 miles to your car. It's not a
Yes.
whole lot.
No.
And then I guess even the problem on the Tesla supercharger, right? I guess this is sort of also in that destination charger category, or I don't know what you would call it, but there are locations, I think it there are locations right near other things and malls and stuff like that, but they have idle fees, right? So you sort of have to get in there, charge it, and then if you can't leave it for too long, otherwise, because there's a line and other people need to use it. So I guess that's the
Exactly.
other issue, right? If you go in to shop for 30 minutes, like you got to be in and out very quickly. So there is, it's not as seamless. I think I would kind of prefer that because you get enough charge, but you're right. It's not as seamless as it could be. I guess there's nothing that beats, charging at home while you sleep, huh?
No. Absolutely. And, I now have an EV after all of my exploration that I
Oh,
did
nice.
back in the
I think
day.
if you're the founder of an EV company, a charging company, you almost have to have an EV, right?
Well, I used to be able to be an armchair anthropologist and be like, I can't have an EV because it's too hard to charge. But then I had to walk the walk, and now I can tell you that it's a total pain in the ass to charge an EV
Yeah.
in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
But when I go to visit people who have garages and I just pull into their driveway, I feel like I'm retired. It's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I like that. No, I think there's something there that you kind of want to bring that feeling like that I kind of take for granted, to be honest, at this point.
Mhm.
Like I never use superchargers. I just charge at home. And,
Mhm.
you want to take that feeling and recreate it with almost anyone and everyone else. And, like you said, it's definitely a lot harder in the city, but I think it would work really any city or region or, suburban or urban if they don't have that garage or driveway. So I think we teed up the kind of macro environment and the problem that we're trying to solve. I really want to dig in now because I think the product that you guys are actually building is cool. So it might be describe the product. You mentioned you teased it a little bit of how it sort of taps in to existing charging infrastructure, but we'd love to know sort of how the product works, where it's at, and kind of the pilots that you're running with right now.
Absolutely. So Itselectric is bringing to North America the first curbside charger with a
Hmm.
detachable cord. This is the model that's already very prominent in the EU and certain
Hmm.
parts of the UK. And that basically means that the charging cable is two-headed. It comes off the charger when you're not using it, and you throw it in your back seat or your trunk, and it's super lightweight. It's no big deal. And what this does is this keeps the cable off the street when that charger is not in use.
Got it.
And it prevents you having to worry about just chargers in front of the public sphere. The number one component that breaks on them is the cable.
Mm.
So by us having you carry the cable with you, not only do you ensure that you have uptime on every charger that you hit,
Hmm.
but we're also, for the people that live in those neighborhoods, because again, we want to install our chargers in residential neighborhoods.
Yeah.
We're not looking to be on commercial boulevards, whatnot. So it prevents those neighborhoods from having cables all over the ground when these
Mm.
chargers are not in use, or having 13-foot tall chargers with cables
Yeah.
dangling down. People really don't want that. So that's sort of the design differentiator and what makes us different. We're really small, we're really discreet. When that charging is not happening, you don't even notice that we're there. But the main differentiator that we like to really drumbeat around is how we power our chargers. So right now, like I said, New York City, Boston, Chicago, any other city that's not LA,
Hmm.
To install a charger requires basically a street closure, tunneling about 7 feet down in the street to get to that main inter-utility connection for the utility in each city,
Mm-hmm.
depending if it's Con Ed, ComEd, Pepco, you name it.
Yeah.
You install a transformer, you install a submeter, you close the street up, and then you put your hardware on top. This is time intensive, this is capital intensive, and the average installation time for one of these chargers in cities that are not like Los Angeles is around 9 months to install
Wow.
a single charger. So we don't have to do any of that. Itselectric installs in a matter of days. We like to say we can install anywhere where there's a building and a curb, because what we do is we siphon the power from any adjacent building, run a small conduit under the sidewalk,
Mm-hmm.
run that to the curb, make that a public charger. And then why would a building let us basically siphon power off of them? Because we revenue share back to them. So every
Got it.
time a car parks and charges in front of one of our chargers, we pay the tariff directly. That building owner never sees their electric bill go up. It never bubbles. And
Mm-hmm.
they're just receiving passive income every month, whether or not they're a 1 or 2 family house, a school, a house of worship, a commercial storefront, you name it. We're
Mm-hmm.
basically just making this the easiest way possible to get chargers in the ground to help cities hit their decarb targets.
Got it. So it sounds like if you guys are typically focusing on residential neighborhoods, you're going to be looking to partner with more apartment buildings, or, I guess like one individual owner of, I guess a building, or, what do they call them in New York? Brownstone. I don't know my New York geography, but I know there's some different types of buildings, right? So you're sort of looking to partner. You would kind of have to convince that owner that, hey, this is a no-brainer. We'll tap into your power. It doesn't cost you anything extra. It sounds like there's sort of only upside for them if the charger is being used, and they can potentially make some money off of it, right?
Exactly. It's just like an 8-inch by 8-inch square on their
Mm-hmm.
curb that they would never be able to monetize in any other way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
They're decarbing their neighborhoods as well. We have to look at things like asthma rates and health issues in cities like New York, which are astronomical, especially in lower income neighborhoods because of emissions. So when you're eliminating those emissions, when you're moving to clean transportation, that's a win. Again, we're free to building owners, we're free to cities, that's a win. And then we let EV drivers be able to charge within very close to where they walk,
Yeah.
very close to where they live.
Mm-hmm.
And then we help people like me back in 2020 that was considering an EV but didn't know where they could charge,
Yeah.
see that they could go EV because they can literally walk out of the door and see that. Like I
Yeah.
like to say, it's not chicken or egg when it comes to the decision to purchase an EV. No one's going to buy that EV in a city like New York
Yeah.
and then try and figure out where they're going to charge.
Mm-hmm.
It's all egg. You've got to walk out in your neighborhood. You've got to see chargers the way that you do in LA
Yeah.
everywhere you go, so that you can have that vehicle and that you can make that transition.
Yeah. So I imagine, I'm not sure how many building owners you've talked to so far, but I imagine that part is probably the easier. I don't know that everyone would say yes, but I feel like that's probably the easier sell. There's got to be some type of, you can't just drill holes in the sidewalk, right? There's some type of city or government
Yes,
approval, right? And so how do you navigate that part?
exactly. So what we need in every city we go to is we need both top-down approval and bottom-up. So we
Got
need
it.
to talk with our city agents, we need to talk with our mayor's offices, our DOTs. And once we have a permitting pathway established, like DC already has a permitting pathway ready to go. They
Cool.
have an open call for level 2 chargers
Mm.
and vendors of those chargers to be able to install on curb. Other cities are still building that pathway. So yeah, with that top down, that city level permission,
Got it.
and then bottom up is property owner permission. And so yes, we do want to definitely expend a lot of shoe leather knocking on people's doors to let them know about this proposition. But I also want to be able to talk to like bigger portfolios of properties
Yeah.
and get those in one fell swoop. And one area I'm super interested in, especially in cities like New York, are schools. Talking to
Mm-hmm.
the Department of Education. If you think about it, those parking spots in front of the schools during the week are dedicated for buses, for teachers, for admin.
Yeah.
And on the weekend, they effectively become free parking.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
if we can convert those spots into EV charging spots on the weekend, those schools are earning passive income every month at a much higher rate than they're earning from other potential revenue income sources through PTA events or whatnot.
Yeah.
And it's, a really great opportunity for schools, especially interested, in environmentalism and stewarding that with their students or their scholars to be able to move that forward in a way that's super proactive and super practical.
Yeah. Well, and I think what I like about this example is, there are a lot of options out there for property owners. You can, in LA, you can build an accessory dwelling unit out of your garage, but, you lose a garage and you can rent it out, but then you've got someone living in the back. And in this type of environment, someone's already parking there, right? So you're not necessarily losing anything. You're kind of adding something.
Hmm.
So I imagine there's a lot less resistance there from homeowners because they're not really giving anything up. They're kind of just taking advantage of
Oh yeah.
something that's already happening.
Yeah, I mean, I see in the future very easily when you're on Zillow, for example, and just as
Hmm.
much as you could see, oh, this house has central air. Oh, this house
Yeah.
has this house has a curbside charger.
Definitely. Well, I know when I search Airbnbs, I usually they don't list it, but I always message the owner. If I'm going on like a 2 hour trip or less in LA to San
Hmm.
Diego or Santa Barbara, I always ask if they've got a level 2 charger because that's
Hmm.
I kind of need it to get back. I don't want to stop at a
You
supercharger.
should have you should write to Airbnb and
I
proposition
think
that
I've seen I think
they
I've
add
seen
that.
someone talking about. I'm sure they'll add it at some point.
Well,
I
yeah.
don't think I'll get any credit or royalties from that idea, but it is one of my many good ideas, hopefully. So,
Well, if
um,
Airbnb is listening right now, then maybe they can make that change.
very cool. So the product tech I like, and then I mean, I guess for cities, like, is this what does it take to convince cities to sort of work on this? You mentioned DC sort of already has a pathway for level, so they obviously have put out some mandate that hey, we want more level 2 chargers. Is that like what's the impetus? I know cities, are often kind of focused on equity and access. I mean, I do like it was funny when you're talking about the charging cables. It really reminded me of the scooters, how like every city freaked out over scooters on the sidewalk, and I was always just thinking to myself, you could just pick them up and move them. It's not that hard.
Mhm.
But I like that the charging cables come off, so there's no sort of sidewalk clutter and things like that. What do cities sort of care about most in this equation?
It's interesting that you talked about equity. Last week there was a really great piece in Axios where they mapped the location of EV chargers across the country in
Hmm.
proximity to, sorry, and then it was delivered against census data on race.
Hmm.
And as you can imagine, most of the EV chargers that are installed are in white neighborhoods.
Yeah,
So how do we make sure that equity is at the forefront of what we're doing here? How do we make sure
gotcha.
that there's chargers in neighborhoods where there's already high adoption, where there's Teslas or 2 Teslas or
Yeah.
5 Teslas on every block, and there's EV chargers in areas where there's zero adoption? Because again, it's
Hmm.
that same thing. People in these communities are not going to go electric once the price drops for electric vehicles. And this is across every demographic, of
Yeah.
course, because very few people can afford, the top of the line cars that are coming out right now on the electric side. But once the secondhand EV market comes online, once the price drops,
Hmm.
Kia is coming out, Hyundai is coming out
Yeah.
with new, more economically minded electric vehicles. And of course, the Biden administration is working on that rebate to make sure that it's applicable on a
Hmm.
wider girth than it currently is. So how do we make sure that everyone has that opportunity to not only purchase the electric vehicle, but to be able to, of course, fuel it? So for me, cities are really interested in this, but they have to really kind of cherry pick where those chargers go right now to make sure they get some kind of utilization.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's a, as I'm sure you've seen
Yeah, that's a
everywhere,
good point.
like it's incredibly expensive for the installation of these other brands of chargers due to the
Hmm.
process that I described, due to the types of hardware that they choose. All of these other chargers as well, they have a lot of sort of like onboard ephemera. They have touch screens, they have
Yeah.
keypads, all of these extra things add cost to the unit
Hmm.
economics. So they need to make their money back.
Yeah.
But we've worked really hard to design a post that doesn't have any frills. There's literally a socket and an RFID reader on it. That's it.
Hmm.
So we can deploy intentionally without discrimination. We want to be
Yeah.
able to put chargers where there's high adoption and where there's none, so that you have that beacon that you can get a charge, you can charge in your neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is a really important topic you brought up because I often joke like the perfect example is, if you drive an EV in Santa Monica, you get to park for free at the meters and it's like 250 per 15 or 20 minutes. And I'm always joking to myself, like, do you really need people people that can afford to live in Santa Monica, do we really need to be subsidizing their meters? And so I think that like I'm never in love with that idea. And it's sort of a little bit of a chicken egg, right? If cities have to spend a lot of money to put chargers in areas where they're not going to be used that much, they probably look at the pilot after 3 or 6 months and say, wow, this was really expensive to put in, no one really
Mhm.
used it, and the folks living in that area like they're not going to go out and buy an EV instantly because of that charging. I think the barrier on the sort of upfront costs, it might be a bit higher. And this, I think, ties in really well to the audience that I know well, with Uber and Lyft drivers, because I always tell people, most of the rides, most of the demand happens in higher socioeconomic areas, as you might imagine, right? Like the busier, the dense, where people are going and ordering food. But drivers, making $15, $20, $30 an hour can't afford to live in those areas, right? So they often live much farther away. Like in LA, they live out in the valley north, or they live out east where it's much cheaper, or down south, right? So I'm kind of curious, like when you start thinking about, like Uber and Lyft drivers, for example, and like kind of their charging needs, how do they fit into the equation here? I'm sure they're a cohort that I know you're looking at.
Yeah, we're very interested in finding solutions for rideshare and for fleet charging.
Mm-hmm.
Same exact reason that you described for LA, same thing here in New York. A lot of these Uber drivers are doing their shifts in Manhattan, and then they actually live out in Ridgewood, Queens. They live out in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. They live in these areas that are not as affluent as the areas that they serve, where they do most of their rounds in Manhattan. So for us right now, the options for them, and especially, when you have companies that are rideshare companies that are looking to push their quote unquote fleets to electric by, I believe, 2030, 2035, you have to find ways for them to be able to charge. So I'd be curious to hear from you sort of what are the average miles that a rideshare driver puts on in cities like LA versus New York, because there's going to be the need to sort of, charge during the day, but also these are drivers these are their cars. They take them home at night.
Yeah.
So they should be able to do that overnight charge, get that battery back up to 100%.
Yeah.
And they can't do that in cities. So we're really excited to find ways to partner with rideshare drivers so that we can install our chargers in front of their building, again, at no cost. They can park there at night, they can charge, and then they're also earning revenue from people that may park there during the day while they're on their rounds, on their
Yeah.
shifts.
Well, I think one of the reasons why electrification has been such a big interest of mine on both the personal and business side is because, well, maybe you don't know, but a lot of people don't know that, a full-time Uber and Lyft driver will easily do 1,000 miles a week on their car, maybe even up to 1,500, especially if they live in an area like LA. They might live 30, 40, 50 miles outside the city. So they're commuting 40 to 50 miles in and out each day. That's 100 miles right there, plus their daily driving, which might be, another 100 to 200 miles, depending on the trips they get and where they go. And so, that kind of break even point, right, between the upfront cost of an EV versus ICE is a lot quicker. There's still, I think the biggest barriers for Uber and Lyft drivers into getting into EVs are sort of one, that upfront cost, and then two, access to charging. So I feel like, you're solving one of those problems, it sounds like, but those are kind of the two main issues for Uber and Lyft drivers.
No, definitely. And it's only going to get worse, especially as cities look to reduce overall vehicle miles driven by private vehicles, by people who have their own personal vehicles, in favor of pushing people more towards shared car models and rideshare opportunities. Those mileage are only going to go up for those rideshare drivers as they work in these urban areas.
For sure. And so I know you've got a pilot or two that's going on. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, or tease what's upcoming, but I'll let you kind of highlight whichever pilot or pilots you want. And I know that you might have an opportunity for some rideshare drivers in New York to get involved, or, it'd probably be good to get a little information out there so that folks, I know you'll have a lot upcoming, people can kind of track your progress. And especially if they're an Uber or Lyft driver and kind of want to, maybe it sounds to me, if I could get a free charger installed in front of my apartment building, it sounds a little too good to be true, but if it could happen, I would definitely be all for it. We won't make any promises. How about that?
Yeah, we're not there yet where we're installing in front of people's private residences. That's where we're going to get. But yeah, we have our first pilot, and it's going to be here in New York City, in Brooklyn, in Sunset Park, in the spring of 2023. It's going to be in a location that's called the Brooklyn Army Terminal. And so we are looking for rideshare drivers that live and or work in that area that want up to 6 months of free charging to be able to sign up, so we can screen them and then hopefully get them into this pilot. All they would need to do for their involvement is basically charge there for free and then answer a few surveys over text.
Cool.
And that's it. These are going to be level 2 chargers, as I mentioned. There'll be a total of 3 chargers installed. And there's also an opportunity, if they'd like, to do a focus group at the end of the charging pilot and earn a gift card in addition to the free charging that they received as a thank you for their participation in the pilot.
Very cool. Well, yeah, no, I think we can definitely help get the word out to EV drivers in New York City with the free charging. And I guess along those lines, so like, how do you envision that pilot working? What's sort of what are you sort of looking to pilot? What are you looking to test? What are you looking to learn with that project you have going on?
Exactly. So the pilot's sponsored by Hyundai Motor Group, which we're really thrilled to have their
Hmm.
sponsorship. And what we're really looking to test is, American drivers' response to that detachable cord that we mentioned.
Mm,
It's already been in the EU and the UK for almost a decade, and it just hasn't come over here. I
yeah.
have a lot of thoughts on theories on why all of our chargers look like gas pumps and iPhones had babies, but we can talk about that another day. So for us, it's really that main
I can
sort of
totally
user.
see your design background come out here and there in during
No
our interview.
judgment, no judgment. But yeah, I mean, like we say ourselves on our website, we're getting rid of the big, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
We want chargers just to really blend into every neighborhood, in every city, and so that it really feels like just another fixture, like a fire hydrant that you see every single day and you don't even think twice about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, I forgot the question, but that's
Oh,
really
no
where
worries.
that's really where we're going, is to try and find drivers.
So
Sorry, to test the detachable cord and to
got
just,
it.
basically give feedback. It's very lightweight. I just carried one. We did a demo. I'm in Brooklyn. I was just in Manhattan doing a
Hmm.
demo. Threw it in my backpack.
Nice. Oh,
No
cool.
problem. Yeah.
So this pilot, Brooklyn Army Terminal, sounds like you're trying to sign up, what, 10, 20 regular
Yeah.
drivers, rideshare drivers, and then sort of just get their feedback on using the product. They'll get free charging. And then I guess, but the main aspect sounds like that detachable cord part.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And we're looking for drivers if they drive any type of make or model vehicle. We're agnostic. So
Yeah.
any EV or hybrid drivers in that area in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, we'd love to hear from you. And I think we can put the link to the sign up in
Yeah,
the show
definitely.
notes,
We'll put
right?
the link in the show notes in the comments. And it actually reminded me, I did have a question on the detachable cord. So, when
Mhm.
you buy an EV from an OEM, they usually give you a cord that, like my Tesla cord, you can plug into a 110 outlet, or you can plug into a 220. Is that the washing machine, or is it 240?
240, yeah. 220,
240
240, yeah.
outlet, right? There's another piece you can attach to do that. And so I guess I kind of already have a one detachable cord that I can use. Would this be a completely different cord? So if I sign up for this program in the future or want to use your charger in the future, would I be able to use one that I have, or do I need a special cord that you guys provide?
Great question. So right now in the US, when you purchase an EV, with the exception of Tesla, everyone else just gives you that level 1 cord that you can
Got
just
it.
plug into like your standard NEMA outlet at home. Um,
Which we don't like. Too slow.
which it's very slow. Yeah, people, I mean, if you're going on vacation, you're just sitting in a cabin for a week, by all means, like let the level
Yeah.
1 trickle charge happen. But we really want to find a way to get those level 2 cords in every trunk, in every car.
Mhm.
Right now in the EU and the UK, that happens automatically when you purchase
Got
any
it.
one of those vehicles. And we see that starting to happen here in the US. So ultimately, everyone will also have one of those. But until then, when you sign up for Itselectric, we will messenger you a cord that you carry with you.
Gotcha.
And then the way that you activate our charge post is just through the app or through a fob that will give you to access to be able to blink on the RFID.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, the last thing that I wanted to touch on is Itselectric will be at our Curbivore conference on March 3rd in downtown Los Angeles. So we're excited to have you there. I would love to have you tease what you'll be talking about and what you'll be bringing to Curbivore.
All right, this is my first Curbivore. I'm super excited. I have
It's
to
only the second time
control.
we've done it in person, so you're
Okay.
1 for 2. That's not bad.
Okay, that's not bad. I have to control my curb puns when I'm around you or Jonah, so it's really I think I found my people. And so we're really excited. We're going to be there. We're going to have our prototype of our curbside charging post. We'll have the detachable cord. People can come see it and
Oh,
use it
cool.
and ask questions. We're hoping to try and figure out what the dialogue is, who I can have conversations with as part of a panel around like how do we engage curbside for electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And this can be a varied question around approach, around partnerships, around policy. So that's all getting ironed out. But I think that the main fun thing will be, getting to actually see the first curbside charger with a detachable cord. And also we have, really good swag because we're called Itselectric. So
Nice, nice. And now that I'm thinking about it, if you guys are curbside charging, you almost have to be at our Curbivore conference, right? That should be
exactly.
my pitch. Just go look for companies with curb in the name or the tagline and say, hey, you got to come.
Exactly. I think I've referred to you and Jonah as the Kerberati of Los Angeles.
Ah, that's
So
right. Yeah, I think I
mhm.
saw that. I like the name. So hopefully we can live up to the hype. And yeah, the event is definitely shaping up nice. I think we've got over a couple dozen partners, and we'll be announcing speakers this week when this podcast goes live. And I think we're expecting close to 1,000 attendees and really cool 30,000 square foot outdoor parking lot. Lots of cool vendors, food, robot making pizzas, drones, EVs, bikes, scooters. Lots of good people, you name it. So I'll be teasing that what's to come at the event a bit more. But for now, keep the focus on Itselectric, and really appreciate you coming on, Tiya. And I think that I'm a big fan of the product and the team and everything that you guys are doing, because I guess selfishly, I think this is going to really benefit a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers. So I think
Yes,
that's what stood out to me when I first heard about your company.
that's awesome. Thank you so much. It was great to be on this podcast, and I'm really glad to have had this conversation with you. It's our longest conversation. We only kind of just run into each other at events, and we finally get to have a nice sit down. So I really
For
appreciate it.
sure, for sure.
Thank
And
you.
I'll leave a link to itselectric.us in the show notes. And if folks want to reach out, should they go to the website, follow you personally? What's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, we'll put it again in the show notes to sign up for the pilot, but people can always email me, Tiya, Tiya at itselectric.us, and I'd love to hear from you.
All right, cool. You might get some emails because our EV episodes are often very popular. And I will say, I do recommend everyone go check out the website because I'm on it, and it is maybe one of the prettiest websites I've seen in a while. So definitely nice work there, Tiya. Appreciate you coming on. Take care.
Thanks so much, Harry.